suppose you wanted to, follow up on this conversation in 100,000 years from now, with our two brains speaking again about the latest developments and what are the updates, and so how is there a way for us to sort of freeze something now that will allow future generations to reproduce us?
Well, there's three ways. I mean, we're already seeing avatars forming, and I'm working with some companies that are making the best avatars, and those will get better. But they're silicon based, and they're kind of magic tricks. Okay. The second way would be to not die.
So do you think it's possible for us?
There's
For the two of
no
us?
physics that I know that makes it impossible. We're
Okay.
actually on a pretty fast exponential trajectory towards developing the technology to do that. I think it's the easiest of the three, and then the third one is to figure out a way to back up our brain in some way in maybe a almost perfect atomic copy of it.
Okay.
That's way outside our current technology, but it's a good solution. But I think the best one is just to not die. And
Okay, let's not die, George. Just tell me what I need to do.
right.
Hey, do you have a recipe or not yet?
We have a recipe of making recipes. So I mean, we have some things going into clinical trials that are based on gene therapies, and gene therapies I think are particularly good in that some of them are you can do them once and it'll last for
Have you
decades.
tried it yourself personally or not?
So the way it works is you have to do randomized clinical trials,
I know.
um, and we are
But you can take risks if you believe in the technology.
I can, but I would have to do it. So a lot of my colleagues take these risks, but they do it at N of one, which is much less informative. So I form, my companies and I make cohorts, which are, have selection criteria and proper consent, and they have, either placebo control or best practices, which is way better than a placebo as a control. And nobody knows who's in the control set. And that's the way to do it. And I'm happy to participate in things. I have been a guinea pig off and on my whole life. I'm in no rush. So, I mean, I think some of my colleagues are trying to move to the front of the line by volunteering to be guinea.
No, because if you wait 10 years, I mean, you will probably live several decades at
Yeah.
least, and by then we would know much more, right? on this.
Exactly. So some people think that if you don't do it before a certain age, it's not going to happen. But we just did an experiment with free gene therapies where we extended their at the point where they're sort of the halfway point of dying. So the point where, the life expectancy point where half of the animals have died, and we extended their remaining life by 50%. So, and that's with a gene therapy applied
That's
at the
amazing.
time, at that late
So
time.
what would be the probability that you assign to the possibility that you and I will not die? What's the likelihood of
I think
that?
it's much better than all the probabilities we've talked about in this conversation. It's not
Okay, what is
some
it?
infinitesimal. It's very likely, I think.
You think so?
Well, it's very likely if we
Okay,
get another 20 years, if we become youthful, for example, rather than just slowing things down.
Well, I jog every day. I try to do my
Well,
best.
there's a lot of things that people have, that I think most people that are well off are doing everything they can, but it's not enough, not nearly enough. What you
Right.
eat, how you exercise, all that.
By the way,
I'm assuming everybody's doing that perfectly. They're still not going to live
the
beyond
biggest
100.
health benefit is who you are married to. I should say that because that's more important than how much you exercise or what you eat. But at any event,
That's
what
definitely
the-
important. But all these things you described are not going to get us past 120.
right?
And for that, you need very serious medicine, and you need it to handle all the different aspects of aging. Because you just fix one, you get 2 years. And if you
Right.
fix another one, you might get another 2 years, or you might get a year. And, it's kind of diminished. But if you do them all at once, you might get 20, 30, or maybe even get to the point where you're completely youthful, in which case, why would you die other than the, accumulation of risk? You might
Right.
have something that's 1 in 1,000, but you do it 1,000 times, and then you have a unit expectation.
So we might be the last generation that went to funerals. That's what you're saying.
Uh, there still will be people that things land on their heads and things like that. There still will be accidents.
Well,
But
that
yes,
would be amazing. Yeah.
we could be the last generation to have the massive deaths that we have. Right now somehow we treat disease of aging very differently than the COVID pandemic. COVID pandemic, we were in an absolute panic over it, rightly so. Um, but a lot more people were dying from old age than were dying from COVID or some combination. Um, and we just need to recognize that it's just as big a crisis as all these other crises. Certainly, we got the terrorism. It killed even fewer people than COVID, but that got a lot of attention, rightly
Yeah.
so. Flesh-eating bacteria is even smaller than terrorism, but that gets a lot of attention. So
Right.
we're not, we don't have to pick one or another, but the point is the big killer is still aging. It's going to kill 90% of us.
And on the one hand, people talk a lot about AI replacing jobs that the humans are currently getting paid for, and that includes academic jobs.
Yeah.
I can easily imagine replacing most administrators by AI in academia. The question is whether also educators and professors. But if we live forever, if we don't die, then the tenure system must change.
Well, hopefully we can reinvent ourselves. I mean, I'm not the same scientist I was when I was 18. Um, I've keep adding fields to my portfolio.
Well, but there would be also a population explosion on Earth. I mean,
That's
over the
also true.
yeah,
And that also well, it depends. Right now, we're getting to the point where we're not exploding anymore.
right.
We're for the first time in history, we're getting close to the point where our population will decrease, and so we could have the opposite problem. And and of course, if I lived another 100 years, I'm not sure I'd be inclined to want to have more children because I've kind of been there, done that, and I want to hang out with my great grandchildren. That's who I really want to enjoy. Um,
I just want to figure out what I was born into. Um, just the same motivation that I had when I was born. My mother told me that I was looking around at the delivery room, and while all the other babies were looking at each other. So it explains why today I don't have any footprint on social media. I don't care how many likes I have, and I really enjoy the process of learning, and that's an infinite process. There's so much to learn about in the universe. We don't know what it's made of. We don't know what happened before the Big Bang. We don't know how life started, where it started, how it came here to Earth. And we talked about some of these issues today, but I just it's a lot of fun to grow in knowing what led to your existence, and that's an infinite frontier. And so it has been a
I think an
great
even bigger frontier is where we go from here, right?
yes,
So in a
exactly.
certain sense, where we've been is finite, but all the directions we can go in the future is big.